Every civilization that ever rose from dust understood a truth that modern men have forgotten, that power is not something seized from the world, but something guarded within the self. The discipline of retaining one's energy, whether called brahmacharya, tapas, or simple self-mastery, has always been the cornerstone of inner sovereignty. In this age of constant stimulation, where attention bleeds out into the thousand open mouths of screens and desires, this principle appears almost alien. Yet to live without it is to drift in a silent famine, a life of plenty that starves the soul. The practice of semen retention is not merely physical. It is the art of remembering that your creative essence is sacred. What once expressed itself as life-giving potency must now be reclaimed as clarity, will, and direction. Energy, when not conserved, becomes confusion. To master retention is to hold the reins of one's scattered forces and guide them back toward the source. The ancient seers often described this state through imagery of fire. In the early stages, the flame flickers with every breeze of temptation. Later, through vigilance, it becomes a steady lamp illuminating the dark corners of consciousness. In our time, that fire is seldom seen because men mistake movement for vitality. They chase experiences, achievements, and pleasures without realizing that each unexamined impulse leaks a measure of life force. What leaks consistently will eventually weaken even the brightest intention. This is not a moral judgment but an energetic law. What is dispersed cannot build. What is drained cannot sustain. Thus, retention becomes a form of inner architecture, a way of constructing integrity that no outer influence can easily shake. Contained energy refines itself. Just as a river gathers strength by narrowing its course, human vitality sharpens through boundaries. When a man refuses to dissipate his essence for trivial rewards, that same essence transforms into insight. His voice deepens, not in tone alone, but in resonance. His eyes become still, his decisions deliberate. The body obeys the command of a focused mind. Such containment does not imply suppression. It means alignment, the conscious choice to channel energy toward creation rather than indulgence. A man who learns this art begins to feel a silent electricity beneath his skin, not lust, but life itself, concentrated. He becomes a vessel large enough to contain both desire and discipline without being broken by either. Our age, however, ridicules such restraint. The modern world worships release as liberation, consumption as freedom, and indulgence as authenticity. To stand against that current is to invite misunderstanding, yet every act of restraint plants the seed of freedom. He who can say no to himself need not fear any external command. The power of retention lies in this paradox. By withholding the lower impulse, one accesses the higher will. It is the alchemy of transmutation, turning the coarse lead of craving into the gold of consciousness. Every generation rediscovers this truth, though few dare to live it. Those who do become rare examples of inner stability in an unstable age. The man who begins this path must not expect immediate peace. The first battle is always internal. The energies that once flowed outward will rebel against redirection. Restlessness, dreams, emotional surges, these are signs not of failure, but of fermentation. The stored energy is waking, demanding to be understood. If he endures this turbulence with patience, the storm will eventually become a wind that fills his sails rather than tears them. To endure without suppression, to observe without reaction, this is the foundation of mastery. It is how one steps out of the endless cycle of depletion and begins to participate consciously in the rhythm of creation. The inner alchemy of polarity. When energy is conserved, it begins to reveal its true nature. Dual, rhythmic, magnetic. Every human being carries within them both the solar and the lunar, the directive and the receptive, the masculine and the feminine. These are not genders but forces, two halves of one whole, that must learn to coexist. Most people live at the mercy of these oscillations, pulled between action and surrender without awareness of the law that binds them. To master retention is to begin seeing this polarity with clarity, to witness how every outward impulse toward attraction corresponds to an inward vacuum of incompletion. The world becomes a mirror reflecting the unbalanced elements within. The cycle of depletion is not caused by women, work, or desire itself. It is born of ignorance, of not understanding how to circulate energy through consciousness rather than through release. Ancient teachings describe this circulation through breath and awareness. When the generative force rises through the spine, it becomes light. When it falls unconsciously, it becomes exhaustion. The same current that creates life also nourishes thought, strengthens intention, and illuminates intuition. The yogis called it ojas, the subtle essence of vitality. To conserve ojas is to nurture the invisible bridge between instinct and insight. As one practices containment, that bridge thickens. Imagination sharpens, focus stabilizes, and emotions become transparent rather than turbulent. This is the silent alchemy that happens in solitude, the conversion of passion into perception. The man who once scattered his strength in pursuit of stimulation now finds joy in simple awareness. A bird's flight, a line of poetry, the stillness between breaths. What was once need becomes presence. But the alchemy of polarity demands honesty. The energy that rises will test every unresolved emotion along the way. Old wounds, guilt, loneliness, and the thirst for validation resurface because the mind is now illuminated from within. Without awareness, such resurfacing can lead to repression or relapse. With awareness, it becomes purification. Each temptation encountered consciously becomes a rung on the ladder of evolution. This is why sages never demonized desire. They transmuted it. They saw in attraction the same energy that could elevate consciousness if redirected. The moment of craving is the moment of choice, to seek temporary relief or to endure the fire until it becomes light. Every time the latter is chosen, the individual breaks a link in the chain of depletion. The modern psyche, however, has forgotten this inner dialogue. It confuses polarity with conflict, believing that one must destroy the other to find peace. Yet harmony is achieved not through domination but through integration. When the inner masculine learns to guide without tyranny and the inner feminine learns to receive without submission, the being becomes whole. The energy that once oscillated between excess and emptiness now circulates smoothly, like breath unbroken. This is the secret of creative potency. The same force that once drained through unconscious indulgence now flows upward, feeding insight, discipline, and vision. To live this way requires continual remembrance. Each day becomes a meditation in balance. When the world tempts him with intensity, he breathes. When the mind grows restless, he grounds himself in purpose. His relationships cease to be arenas of need and become fields of exchange, sacred spaces where energy flows but does not dissipate. He learns to give presence instead of possession, attention instead of craving. Such a man is rare, for he embodies the quiet dignity of those who have mastered their own currents. Within him, the ancient polarity no longer wars. It dances, and in that dance, power is not lost but renewed. The mirror of temptation, every discipline worth its salt, eventually meets its own reflection. For the man walking the path of energy mastery, that reflection comes not as failure but as temptation. It appears and forms both subtle and grand and alluring image, a moment of nostalgia, an emotional hunger disguised as affection. To the untrained mind, temptation looks like an external force trying to invade. To the conscious mind, it is the psyche revealing its remaining attachments. The mirror does not lie. It shows what still holds sway over the will. When a man feels pulled toward release, it is not the world that seduces him but his own memory of pleasure and the relief it once promised. The true battle of retention, then, is never with a person but with a pattern. To meet that pattern with awareness is to transform it. The ancient teachers spoke often of watching without reaction, of observing the wave without becoming it. In practice, this means recognizing desire as energy in motion, not as sign or shame. The more one fights it, the stronger it grows. The more one simply witnesses it, the more it reveals its source. Beneath every craving lies the same root, the longing for connection. Yet connection pursued through depletion breeds dependence, while connection experienced through presence breeds wholeness. The same impulse that drives a man toward another, when met with awareness, becomes the impulse that drives him inward, toward understanding. The energy turns, the current reverses, and what was once lost becomes illumination. Temptation, then, is not the enemy, it is the curriculum. Each time energy surges, it carries within it a lesson. It asks, can you feel this fully without losing yourself? Can you love beauty without consuming it? Can you honor the magnetic pull of life without surrendering your stability? These are not moral questions but tests of awareness. The sages taught that until one can answer them silently, peace will remain conditional. When a man passes these trials, his energy matures. Desire ceases to be an uncontrolled tide and becomes a conscious current. The world remains beautiful, but it no longer dictates his movements. Yet this transformation does not make him detached or cold. Paradoxically, it opens him to deeper feeling. Because he no longer seeks completion through another, he can finally see another as whole. His relationships shift from transaction to resonance. Where he once approached to receive, he now approaches to share. The energy that once drained outward now radiates through presence. People sense it, not as resistance but as gravity, the calm pull of someone who no longer leaks his essence through restlessness or need. Temptation loses its teeth, not because he avoids it, but because it no longer finds emptiness to feed on. And so the mirror becomes clear. In it, he sees not the image of a saint or a sinner, but of a human being who has learned to hold his own reflection without judgment. The lesson of temptation is integration. Every encounter that once weakened him now teaches balance. Every memory that once haunted him now becomes a reminder of progress. When the mirror of temptation reflects only awareness, depletion ends. Energy that was once scattered returns like water, finding its source. And within that stillness, a quiet joy arises, the joy of knowing one's power is one's own. The architecture of stillness when the storms of craving have passed and the mirror of temptation grows clear. What remains is stillness, vast, luminous, unhurried. But stillness is not emptiness. It is structure. It is the architecture of mastery, built stone by stone from choices quietly made. Every refusal to be ruled by impulse, every moment of silent endurance, adds a brick to the inner citadel. A man who lives by containment begins to sense that his discipline is not a cage but a temple. Within its walls, the mind ceases to chatter and begins to listen. What it hears first is the subtle pulse of life itself, unmediated by fantasy or fear. To sit inside this architecture is to rediscover simplicity, breath, heartbeat, awareness, no longer scattered but aligned. This stillness is a form of intelligence. It does not reject motion, it measures it. It allows energy to circulate without collapse, to rise and descend with rhythm rather than chaos. Ancient yogic texts describe this as susumna, the central channel through which balanced energy ascends. Modern language might call it coherence or focus. Whatever the name, it is the same experience, power guided by equilibrium. The man who abides in this state is not indifferent to the world. He is rooted in it. His actions emanate from calm rather than compulsion. Because he no longer seeks validation, his words carry weight. Because he no longer chases intensity, his presence becomes magnetic. This is the quiet paradox of mastery. The less one tries to impress, the more others feel the impression of depth. Stillness also refines perception. Without the constant noise of craving, subtle details emerge. The timbre of a voice, the rhythm of footsteps, the changing texture of light. Awareness stretches outward yet remains anchored within. One begins to see how life moves through patterns, how every encounter, every success, every loss participates in an unseen symmetry. Energy once squandered in reaction now fuels discernment. Decisions become cleaner, timing more intuitive. This clarity is not mystical, it is practical awareness, born from the absence of distraction. The man who once stumbled through moods and desires now walks through them as through weatherware, adaptable, untouched at the core. But stillness requires maintenance. The architecture, though strong, can erode if neglected. The mind is like a river, given no channel, it floods its banks. Thus, practice remains essential. Meditation, discipline, purposeful action, and solitude. These are the rituals that keep the structure intact. In such living, every ordinary task becomes sacred: eating, working, resting, all infused with awareness. There is no longer a split between spiritual and mundane. There is only presence, and presence, sustained, becomes peace. This peace is not fragile. It is the unshakable calm of one who knows his own rhythm. The ancient masters described it as being in the world but not of it, participating fully while remaining untouched by the undercurrents of chaos. In this architecture of stillness, energy no longer seeks escape. It circulates like blood through a healthy body, silent, life-giving, unseen yet essential. The man who lives thus becomes an instrument of balance. His creativity, once erratic, now flows steadily. His ambition, once driven by hunger, becomes guided by purpose. He no longer burns out because he no longer burns unnecessarily. This is the mature phase of retention, not denial, not control, but stewardship. To hold energy wisely is to serve life itself, and in that service, the individual finds meaning deeper than desire. The return of the light, every cycle that begins with struggle must end with illumination. The man who once wrestled with his impulses eventually discovers that what he was fighting was not darkness but potential misunderstood. As he walks beyond depletion, he feels energy return in unfamiliar forms: clarity, compassion, precision. The same current that once pulled him outward now moves through his mind as insight and through his hands as creative strength. Retention was never meant to make him rigid, it was meant to make him whole. In holding back, he learned where his borders lay. In understanding those borders, he found the path back to unity. The light that returns is not a flash of ecstasy, but a steady dawn, soft, patient, revealing what has always been there. Illumination changes the way he perceives both himself and others. Where he once saw conflict, he now sees polarity, seeking balance. Where he once saw temptation, he now recognizes invitation to awareness, to empathy, to growth. He no longer divides the world into sacred and profane, higher and lower, masculine and feminine. He understands that each complements the other, that energy must circulate between opposites to stay alive. The lesson of retention, when matured, is not separation but harmony. A man who can meet the world's beauty without hunger, who can meet its pain without collapse, embodies true strength. His relationships transform, for he no longer gives to be emptied, nor receives to be filled. He gives because he overflows. He receives because he can contain. The return of the light also brings responsibility. Power kept in silence carries weight, and its direction determines destiny. Now that he has reclaimed his energy, the question becomes, what shall he build? Creation is the natural consequence of conservation. The energy that no longer leaks through indulgence seeks expression through purpose. Some channel it into art, others into service, meditation, or leadership. Whatever the form, the essence is the same life turned outward in conscious offering. This is the higher octave of the same current that once manifested as desire. The outer world begins to reflect this inner order. Circumstances align, synchronicities occur, and a quiet sense of rightness accompanies every act. Retention, at its pinnacle, becomes radiance. Yet even radiance must remain humble. The cycle does not end in triumph, but in gratitude. The man who has touched stillness knows that every breath is borrowed, every insight transient, every heartbeat a reminder of impermanence. He guards his energy not to dominate but to serve, not to tower above others but to hold space for clarity in a world addicted to noise. He understands that to retain is to respect the self, others, and the mysterious source that animates all. The power he once sought now resides naturally within him, quiet and luminous. People feel it not through display but through the calm gravity of his presence. And so, the cycle completes itself. The energy once lost to chaos becomes consciousness. Consciousness becomes compassion. Compassion becomes wisdom. The man who began his journey building walls ends at opening gates. For his strength no longer needs protection. He can engage the world without being consumed by it. The inner and outer, the masculine and feminine, the effort and the ease all find their rhythm in him. This is the return of the light. Energy no longer trapped in the loop of craving and fatigue, but moving freely through awareness, fueling both peace and purpose. The discipline of retention becomes the art of living, and in that art, the man realizes that the true secret was never about withholding, but about remembering who he is when he stands still and lets the whole universe move through him. If this video charged your internal battery, please show some love. Give this a quick like and subscribe to make sure you never miss an energy upgrade. I love seeing our global community grow, so please drop your location in the comments. Sit fuels the channel. If you've got questions that need an answer or want to connect with like-minded people, find us on Telegram, link below. Let's spread this power. Take a moment to share this with your crew. Have a truly powerful day.